Welcome to JLive. I'm JArts Executive Director Laura Mandel, and it's great to be with you for JLive, our series of virtual cultural experiences that bring us together to explore and celebrate the diverse world of Jewish art, culture, and creative expression. We're bringing you bite-sized conversations with the best Boston area talent. Today, we are very lucky to be talking about Chelsea, right next door to Boston, which you may not know used to be called Little Jerusalem. I learned that and so much more about Chelsea from Ellen Rovner, who has led many JArts groups on food walking tours of Jewish Chelsea over the past few seasons. And since we can't all go for that tour right now, we thought we would bring a little taste of it to you now. So Ellen is a cultural anthropologist, food lover, and fourth-generation Chelsea native. She has actually introduced me to Rafaella Zabot-Hall, who's also with us today, who's originally from Portland, Maine, but currently lives in Chelsea, where her grandparents and great-grandparents were born. Since graduating from college, she's been baking and cooking a lot of the foods from her childhood and family recipes to make them her own. And it feels only fitting that they're both with me today. So, Ellen and Rafaella, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Great to be here.
I love this because this is all about family and stories. So, Ellen, why don't you kick us off? Tell us a little bit about your Chelsea and Jewish family story.
My Chelsea Jewish family is really my entire family. My great-grandparents arrived in Chelsea, and then my grandparents, and they came before my grandparents, and then my grandparents, and then my parents were born and raised in Chelsea, and then I was born and lived in Chelsea till I was in the 5th grade when we moved to the suburbs. But even after we left, we went to Chelsea pretty regularly. My family had businesses in Chelsea, and my mother went there to get food that was not available at the time in the suburbs. So Chelsea always is very much a part of who I am. And I'm thrilled to be here to talk about it a little more.
Love that. And Rafaella, tell us about your story.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I moved to Chelsea when I graduated from college in 2019. My aunts and my grandfather lived here, and so it seemed like a great place to start out right after college. And so my grandparents and my great-grandparents were born here in Chelsea. And my grandfather, he moved back to Chelsea about 10 years ago. And so that started kind of my learning more about Chelsea and the history of my family here. And just the more I've learned, just my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and my great-great-grandparents, their contribution to Chelsea. It's just been amazing to be here and learn that.
Love that. So I know this is all about food and how we see the history of our community through food. So I know that you have both prepared something for us today. Rafaella, since you mentioned that you have spent a lot of your time cooking and baking your family recipes, will you share with us what you have created today?
Yeah, so today I actually created something, and then my grandfather also made something that I could share. So I'll share that first. I have here a challah that my grandfather made, and he makes this every Shabbos for us. We spend Shabbos together. And so we have a homemade challah every week, which is really nice. It just makes it more special to have that and look forward to that. And then, so I baked, we call them Bubbies Cookies. This is what they look like. And they have cinnamon sugar on top, they have chocolate chips in them, and they're called Bubbies Cookies because they are my great-great-grandmother's recipe. And it was something that was passed down. My grandmother makes them often during holidays and just randomly. And so it's one of those family recipes that's been passed down, and it always comes out differently. It's never the same. Sometimes it's, there's chocolate chips in them sometimes there's chocolate chips and raisins, and sometimes they're a little overcooked or undercooked. And so it's fun to kind of see how the recipe changes, and I'm kind of figuring out how to make it my own.
I love that, because Ellen, you and I have talked so much about how ingredients and recipes have changed over time because of the influence of the location. So I don't know, do you want to tell us a little bit?
Yeah, today I made my mother's stuffed cabbage or rolled cabbage, which, can you see it?
It looks incredible, and you do know it's not fair to be showing me these delicious things that I can't eat.
Especially at this time, I know, right before dinner. As you know, stuffed cabbage is really an iconic Jewish dish. It originated in Eastern Europe, and there are a lot of, it's found in Germany, Poland, all around, and Sweden. And the Jewish people called it halishkas. And my grandparents, of course, brought their food with them, or their ideas about food. My grandmother, when she came here, you know, she was from Lithuania, and she didn't, I have to say, she didn't read or write. So she had no recipe cards, but she learned to cook, I guess, watching her mother. And when she came here, she made pretty much the same kinds of foods that her mother made, except that the ingredients changed and they became more Americanized. So women, food was very much a part of Eastern European women, Jewish women's identities. And they were really struck by novelty when they came here, about all the abundance of food and all the choices there were. So while they were tasked with maintaining kosher households for the most part, and maintaining the ritual of Jewish rituals around food, they liked to experiment with what was new and what was modern. And so for my grandmother, that meant having oranges and bananas for the first time, and having foods that were somewhat out of reach for them in Eastern Europe, but became kind of ordinary in this country. So when my grandmother made spaghetti, she used Campbell's tomato soup. And then when she made her stuffed cabbage, which to capture that traditional sweet and sour flavor, she used also used Campbell's soup, which was kosher, Campbell's soup and ginger snaps. She crushed them up, and that was her sweet and sour. But then when my mother made it, she had a different recipe. And by that time there were, you know, recipe cards. Women were passing recipe cards around as a form of almost as their own language, like a gendered food language. And it kept my mother very much connected with different friends, and it was part of a very tight network of people she knew growing up and people who she knew later on in her life. But she too wanted convenience and wanted to be modern. So her stuffed cabbage was made differently than my grandmother's. Still sweet and sour, still with ground meat, and still with cabbage. And what she used, she used two jars of Heinz chili sauce. And she used canned cranberries, whole canned cranberries, and she used about 1/2 to 3/4 of a jar of currant jelly. So she would core the cabbage, parboil the leaves, mix up the meat, grate an onion, salt and pepper, whatever seasoning, make the little meatballs, and then when the cabbage leaves cooled off, she would roll them and then stack them in a pot. And she would mix up the Heinz chili sauce, the canned cranberries, the currant jelly, and then she would pour it all over it. And she did hers on top of the stove. And she did it for about an hour and a half. And then the last half hour, she would put it in a 300 oven so it would get nice and firmed up. I'll tell you, they're really delicious. They're really delicious. And I mean, she used ingredients that now are not popular, that I had to search to find some of these ingredients, but they really taste good. They really taste good. So, and for me, this food is really connects me to people I loved very much, who are no longer in my life, and at least physically no longer in my life. And it connects me to a very rich tradition of family and love and comfort. And I especially love the simplicity of it, that it takes a little while to cook, but it's really kind of a very simple, easy dish. And I find, especially now at this time, find a lot of solace in that.
And I think it's really beautiful that you're both showing us recipes that really are so simple and relatively basic, and yet that's kind of a lost thing these days. So I think that's
Right.
really
Right.
wow. So in addition to the food piece of this, of course, I'm excited that Ellen, you're involved with this Brighter Connected JArts Hanukkah window project that we're working on. And the reason I bring this up is because we're going to have these 8 windows around Boston to bring the light of Hanukkah to many communities around Boston. And one of them is going to be in Chelsea. And you've been really central to this. And I think it's really special that we're sort of not just raising the Jewish story of Chelsea, but talking about the many different cultures and faiths that exist within Chelsea. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, Chelsea has been a gateway city for since the 1840s, really, and it remains very much an immigrant city, a very resilient city, a city where people really work very hard to find, they come to find better lives, and a city that is very small, and so everybody knows each other, and is also very focused on family and just learning and wanting something more than what they had where they started. So right now, Chelsea is, as at one time was predominantly Jewish, really, through World War II and until probably the 60s and the 70s. But now it's predominantly Latinx, and people come from all over, from Colombia, from Guatemala, from Argentina, from Cuba, from Mexico. So it's incredibly diverse, as well as being the home for many Somali refugees and in different Asian refugees. So it's an incredibly vibrant place, as it's always been. It's always been. I know that was certainly the case when I was younger and when my family was living there, you know, with Yiddish theater and Yiddish stores everywhere and little delis and butcher shops and all kinds of things. Well, now, and hearing Yiddish on the street, well, now it's Spanish. And people come from very different backgrounds, but often with very similar aspirations and hopes and dreams. So it's a great place. It's wonderful. And I think that JArts doing this in Chelsea is fabulous because it recognizes all of that. It celebrates all of that. And Clint is an amazing artist, and it was my pleasure to kind of show him around the city. And I think it's going to be great. It's going to be wonderful. So thank you very much.
Well, I'm delighted to make it work. And for all of you watching, I am not encouraging gatherings. This will be COVID safe, but I do encourage you, if you get a chance, to get over to Chelsea during Hanukkah, because this piece will be absolutely beautiful. And I think it's a great opportunity to see what the neighborhood is now, because it's really a great place. And I've loved getting to know it through you, Ellen. So thank you.
Thanks, my pleasure.
Well, and the other thing I love is that Rafaella mentioned her grandfather who bakes this challah, and he's also a part of this story. So I don't know, will one of you speak to?
Rafaella, do you want to speak to your grandfather's connection to JArts? Are you aware of this?
I mean, more so to his connection to the show and the partnership between JArts and the show. So here in Chelsea, my grandfather is a huge part of Walnut Street show. And his family has been a part of this synagogue for a long time. And so since he's moved back, he's been very involved in that, maintaining the show.
And he reached out to Laura at JArts to help him and the Walnut Street show implement a concert, a cultural plan that we've been talking about for a while, and that's to have Anthony Russell do a concert on Yiddish music and also Black spiritual music. So I think it's going to be terrific. I think it's
It
going to be
will
great.
be. And I also have to say, if anybody has not seen the Walnut Street Shoal, you must find an excuse when it is safe to do so to go see it, because it is the most gorgeous sanctuary with a hand-carved wooden ark and a beautiful painted fresco ceiling. It's really just a stunning gem of this city that I'm kind of always amazed how few people know about it outside of the Chelsea bubble. So, Ellen, I'm with you. Getting people to go see that.
Yes, definitely, definitely. It's it's great. Walnut Street is great. There's also another synagogue, Temple Emmanuel, which has been around since the 1920s. And those are two synagogues that are active in Chelsea. They are what remains from a city that's only 1.8 square miles, and at one time was home to anywhere from 18 to over 20 synagogues. So it really was a very Jewish city, and in memory, it still is.
Yeah, well, and my mother would be mad if I didn't say that I have roots in Chelsea. So I think there's many of us in this community who can connect.
Right.
So tell me this, we were talking a lot about how Chelsea has been hit the hardest by COVID. It's really been pretty terrible. I also think it's wonderful that there was this big article in the Globe today about the things that people are doing. So can you tell us a little bit about, what we can do and what is happening in Chelsea that we should be looking to?
Well, the need goes on. It's people can, of course, donate. People can donate money to La Colaborativa, which runs a food pantry and has a campaign running now to raise money for over the holidays in the winter. And the name of the campaign is Whatever It Takes. And the goal is to just to provide people with rent money, with food, with money to buy Christmas gifts, whatever it takes. So that's, they've raised about $20,000 and the goal is about $100,000. So I hope people will consider giving to that for, even as a Hanukkah gift, make a generous donation. And also mentioned today in the Globe was Cara Cogliano, who runs Chelsea Community Connections. And I worked with her in the spring raising money for diapers. The need for diapers is still incredibly severe. And unfortunately, many of the people in Chelsea worked in the hospitality industry and in businesses that are no longer functioning. And many of them, because of their documentation status, are not eligible for unemployment. So people are really in dire straits. So anything you can do at this holiday season, this end of the year, it's a wonderful way to say Happy Hanukkah to your children and to just people who mean a lot to you in your life. So I hope you'll do it.
Love that. It's a great Hanukkah gift idea.
Great.
Yeah. So Rafaella, since you do live there now, I'm wondering if you have any other thoughts for us.
Sorry. I think Ellen really said everything. Just supporting the community here. It's a really great community and there's a lot of people who need support. And I think that just kind of paying attention to different communities and Chelsea especially, and especially the Jewish community, when Walnut Street Show has events, kind of looking into that. I think all of that is really important.
That's great. And I should mention Rafaella's aunt is now newly a city councilor in Chelsea.
That's right.
Yeah, very exciting. So there's a long history here with
there is.
Wonderful.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. Great. Well, this has been wonderful. And thank you so much for being here. I hope that when we can be back in person, that we'll all be able to go on a walking tour together.
I hope so too. I hope so too. And I'll do it again. I'll do it again.
And I should note to everyone, on one of the tours, Ellen took us behind the scenes at Kate's Bagels, and it was just the most fun thing. And I also have to share, because I love this fact, that apparently the pizza bagel was supposedly invented at Kate's Bagels in Chelsea. And so I highly recommend that if and when it's safe, go get some bagels and some pizza bagels.
Yeah, Kate's is open. Kate's Bagels are open. The bakery's open till about 3 o'clock most weekdays. And he still has pizza bagels and all kinds of other goodies. So please stop by.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you both so much. I think we have plenty more that we'll be discussing of Chelsea in the future, but as a little taste, this has been wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
No,
Thanks.
thank
Thank you.
both.
Bye-bye. Bye.
And although we won't have another JLive until January, I hope you all will check out the JArts YouTube page, and you can watch the many episodes of JLive that we've had over the past few months. And of course, last but not least, let culture connect us. JLive and other JArts programming are really made possible by generous support from people like you. So if you like what you're seeing, please consider making a gift now. As Ellen said, it's a perfect Hanukkah gift, whether it's diapers for families in Chelsea, supporting the arts through JArts. It's all wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.